Alrighty, in your notebook you should have this image along with the 3 challenge questions in which you've recorded on that page. You should also have an engage, and you should have answered these 2 questions on that engage page in your class notebook. We began the NOVA Evolution Labs activity. It contains interactive lessons with videos and activities. We start with an Evolution 101 introductory video, which then provides an overview of all 6 missions. We start by opening up the Evolution 101 video, watching it, and then answering questions 1 through 5 in our class notebook. Let's go ahead and review the Evolution 101 video questions. Okay, there are 5 on the page. According to the video, what are the 2 key ingredients to natural selection? You should have had reproduction and variation. This is nothing new. We've talked about asexual versus sexual. We talked about how you pass your genes on and how you get the most variation. Second one, what does the fittest mean in an evolutionary sense? It means that you're the most reproductively successful. You're able to pass on those genes. Evolution is neither entirely fixed nor entirely random. In question 4, it's asking you what is happening in the image and how does it illustrate the concept of natural selection. Well, you see a bird, and in the bird's mouth is a yellow insect. There's also another insect on the second leaf that you can't see because it's blended into that leaf. What does that mean? It means the bird's able to eat the yellow insect, probably because it's easier to see and catch than the green one, which is blended with the leaf. This illustrates natural selection because a variation in color, such as green, is giving some of the insects an advantage that will help them to survive longer and reproduce more frequently than the yellow-colored insects. And according to the video, what is the goal of the Tree of Life? Well, to explain how all species are related to each other. Okay, now we're going to begin to go into the 6 missions. There are 6 of them. We see that on the page when you open it up, you can see there are mission 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. They will each be locked until you complete them. Mission 1, Training Trees, is where we began. We started with an introductory video which provides an overview of all of Mission 1 and the 3 interactive lessons that you'll be taking place in, each with a video of their own and a family tree to build. Always remember to double check that you are logged in, as you will get credit. You won't have to start it all over again. If you aren't logged in, all the work that you do is not saved. Beginning with the video that starts the mission, and then it has the 3 activities. So there are 3 activities that include information on the shared traits of the organisms and an evolutionary family tree that you build using these inherited traits. Also, leaves are earned and will light up after completing a successful tree and answering the question at the end of each activity. So for each activity you get 2 leaves, 1 for the tree building correctly and 1 for answering the question. Let's review Mission 1 introductory video. What does the circled node represent? Both A and B. It represents the common ancestor species of A and B, and it also represents speciation. Every time it branches out, we get a speciation event. Which way does time run on this tree? From the root to the branch tip, from the bottom up to the top of the branches. Which live more recently in time? The common ancestor species A and B or the common ancestor species B and C? It's the common ancestors B and C. The traits A and B share trait root. So that's trait 1, that's the very beginning that they all share. B and C share both trait root 1 and 3 as well. Use your answers to that questions 3 and 4 to explain why B and C are most closely related to each other than A and C. Well, B and C are more closely related because they share more traits. They share trait 1 and trait 3. Then A and B, they only share 1 trait, the same trait as everyone else on the tree. So for the similarities, you should have had 1, because you can see that C and B are on the same branch because they have more shared traits together. And 3, again, B and C are on the same branch. And 3, why? Again, B and C are on the same branch. 2 you cannot pick because A and C are on there. That's not the paired combination of the shared traits for 1 and 3. Okay, next, let's review mission 1. Activities, there are 3 of them: Red Green Gecko, Familiar Faces, Tree of Life Vegetarian Edition. Let's start with Red Green Gecko. We'll go through the data table and family tree. Alright, Red Green Gecko. Here's our introductory video. Under a microscope, the cells of mushrooms, plants, animals all have visible nuclei. This makes them all autotrophs. What trait do the mushrooms and geckos share that the tree lacks? They're both heterotrophs. And if you were to draw the completed tree and an equal one, it's much like that previous question 5. Any 2 of these 4 trees, one would be your completed, and any one of the others you could have drawn for your equivalent tree, as long as, again, the branch contains the gecko and the mushroom, the gecko in the mushroom, the gecko in the mushroom, the gecko in the mushroom. The palm tree is speciated all by itself. The pop-up question at the end of this level asks whether an animal or plant is more closely related to a fungus. Why is this correct answer likely surprising? Well, it's surprising. Oops, sorry, that also goes there. That's what it looks like in the module. Mushrooms and plants look a lot more like than mushrooms and animals do. Neither move around like animals do. You find them both somewhere in the ground, so you might think that a mushroom and plant are more closely related than a mushroom and animal, but it turns out the mushroom and the gecko, which is an animal, is actually more closely related than to the palm tree. Okay, so where did I get that information? What did it look like? I went to this magnifying glass. I clicked on it. It then opens this box with all the organisms in it. And in that, you can go through the information, and in these little sections up above, you will be able to complete the data table as well as your family tree, because it lists their shared traits. Shared traits in this particular activity, such as cells with nuclei, heterotrophic, photosynthetic, and it describes below what each of those mean. So let's look at our data table. First, I list my organisms. I have 3 of them. Then I list the traits that I found. I know that cells with nuclei are eukaryotes. DNA, we have already reviewed this. We went through this earlier in our genetics unit. Heterotrophic, it means that it obtains its nutrients by consuming other organisms. And lastly, photosynthetic autotroph. Auto means that it can self-feed, uses energy from sunlight to turn carbon dioxide and water into sugar. Then I click and say, okay, mushroom has cells with nuclei, the gecko does, and so does the palm tree. So this is a shared trait that all 3 organisms contain. Heterotroph is only the mushroom and the gecko and not the palm tree. Who is photosynthetic? Not the mushroom, not the gecko, only the palm tree. So from this, I can literally build my family tree. Why? The shared traits of all becomes our root of our tree, because they're shared by everybody, followed by the branch pair that share their traits. So they'll be in that little pit, that tuning fork, that U on the same branch together. And then you can see this is all by itself. It's its own branch, separate. It's speciated out all on its own. So this is what it should look like. You can see the palm tree speciated out all on its own. And in there, these little colored dots represent each of the traits. So you know that you've correctly built the tree when you have all of the dots filled in. So you can see this blue goes to all 3 organisms because it is their root trait. The heterotrophic trait only goes to the mushroom and the gecko because that's a shared trait evolutionary. The photosynthetic autotroph only goes to the palm tree. Then it begins to ask you, now that you've completed the first puzzle, answer the question. Is an animal or a plant more closely related to a fungus? Well, we can see that an animal is. It's the gecko. They're on the same branch. They share two inherited traits, where the mushroom and the gecko have two. The palm tree only has one. That is the root trait. So nice job, animals including geckos and people. All fungi are more closely related to each other than to plants. Fungi and animals have to consume living things to get energy and nutrients, where plants use sunlight to make their own food, hence autotroph. Let's go ahead and review familiar faces, the data table and family tree. What is an amniote, and which animal on this tree is an amniote? Well, an amniote is an animal whose embryo developed inside the set of protective membranes, just like you did in your amniotic sac inside of your mother. The snake and the dog are amniotes, and they share that trait. If you were to add a cat onto this tree, it would be placed so that the cat and dog are more closely related to each other than to anything else on the tree as shown. What biological trait could you use in the spot that's marked? Well, there's a few of them. Many of you probably chose the hair or the fur. All right, let's fill out the data table. Again, we start with the organisms. Dog, goldfish, king snake, and stick. Then I put the traits that I picked out from the magnifying glass piece. Amniote, all that means is this is an embryo that develops inside the set of protective membranes. I added a little note to myself in each of these data tables. Vertebrate, those are skeletons supported by a single backbone, just like ours. And bilateral symmetry, which means that their left and right halves of the body look the same. So if you were to cut them down the middle, they look very similar on the left and the right. Amniotes are dogs, not a fish. A king snake, not a stick insect. Vertebrates, dogs, goldfish, king snake, not a stick insect. Bilateral symmetry, dog, goldfish, king snake, stick insect. Okay, now can you start to see the pattern? They all share this trait, which means, again, that's the root trait. That's going to be the very beginning of the bottom of your root, where you start from the bottom and work your way up. It's a shared trait by all. This one, there are three. That's the branch trio. So these three should be placed on a branch together. And lastly, you'll see them speciate these two off on their own again, where it is the branch pair who share traits, the dog and the king snake. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. Again, you can see this. They all share bilateral symmetry. Each of them, if you cut them in half, you'd see the left and the right being very similar. The stick bug has to speciate on its own because it doesn't share the trait of vertebrates. So it went evolutionarily on a different line. These three went down the same line, as we could see, because they all shared the trait of vertebrates. But then these two speciated out because they share the trait of amniotes. Their young are in placenta, in a sac, protective sac, when they are developing. Okay, so the animals in this puzzle look very different. They all have one thing in common, that trait. They all share bilateral symmetry. That is their root trait. So it'll come up and say you did it. Sometimes both visible and hidden traits can provide valuable clues about the common ancestry of different organisms. Lastly, let's go ahead and review our Tree of Life, Vegetarian Edition, data table and family tree. What makes the seaweed different from all other plants on this tree? Well, it uses spores to reproduce. Again, we have a pop-up question at the end of this level. Asks whether a banana is more closely related to a lemon or an onion. Why might the correct answer be surprising to so many? Well, it's definitely surprising because we view onions as vegetables and bananas and lemons both as fruits. Particularly when we go into the grocery store, they're sorted pretty much like that. So you might think that a banana and a lemon are more closely related than a banana and an onion plant. But when we then begin to look at evolutionarily shared traits, we see a different picture. We list our organisms. We have a banana, a lemon, an onion, a radish, and a seaweed. Then we look at our traits. We see that some of the traits are flower petals with multiples of 3, so you have 3 of them around it. That flowers contain pollen, which comes from a kind of spore. Pollen is spread from plant to plant with the help of wind and insects. We have a photosynthetic trait, and then we have a flower petals multiples of 4 or 5. So the 4 and 5 are different than the 3. Spores. And seaweeds also reproduce via spores, which are released into the surrounding water. Okay, so then we go through it. We see that the flower petals that are multiples of 3 are only shared by the banana and the onion. Photosynthesis is shared by all of the organisms. Can you see that that's going to be our root trait that we all start out with? Flower petals, multiples of 4 or 5. Again, the lemon and the radish. And then lastly, the only one that contains this type of spore that we are talking about is the seaweed. This will be our root of our tree, shared by all. This will be a branched pair that we see. This will be a branched pair that we see because they share traits, and this will be off all on its own after our root. And so when we look at it, we can see that the photosynthetic autotroph is shared by all. So that's the color up here. There's one here, one here, one here, one here. Then it speciates out. Only this one releases its spores into the water. Then these are on their branch. So another trait is added, which produces flowers. So you should see the red up here on each one. But then they speciate out again into petals and multiples of 3, which are these. So they have the purple trait that they share. And then these speciate out into multiples of 4 or 5. So they have this color trait that they share. Is a banana more closely related to a lemon or an onion? As you can see, the banana and the lemon are on the same branch. So the onion is more closely related to the banana. Fruits and vegetables are usually displayed in separate sections of the grocery store, but some plants that produce vegetables are more closely related to plants that produce fruits and vice versa. Okay, your goal for the remaining time of this week until we meet again on Monday is to go through missions 2 and 3, completing them. They're introductory videos. They're 3 activities each. And then we'll go through them again, much like we did the following week. So this Wednesday and Thursday on our longer day, we'll go ahead and go through more information and more details of mission 1 and answer any questions that you have or any ones that you have on this current missions 2 and 3.